a key dominant theme at last month's ISTE conference, International Society for Technology and Education, which they've changed their name to Transforming Education. And I think a lot of it has to do with this new term that's being used called Techlash. School boards, superintendents, curriculum directors are freezing software budgets. They're scaling down the technology needs. And it's not a Luddite retreat from technology, but it's really a profound crisis of trust. You see, so much of what we've done in education is we have ceded a lot of our stuff to big tech. We put Chromebooks in the hands of all these students, and it hasn't ended well, right? And then you throw in AI, and now we have AI where people are offloading their thinking to AI, letting AI do the thinking for them. And when you do this, particularly with novices, our students, it is stupefying them. What do we do? So the solution to this cognitive drift is not another software program. We need to rethink how we do our learning environments. So this week, as you listen to today's podcast, I'm releasing the full, or almost I edited a little bit, the full presentation where I talked about the solution to the cognitive crisis. It is my presentation in Curitiba, Brazil. I spoke there late May, and I talked about how we could reorganize classes for the future of education. And so I hope that as you watch this, it's a much, much longer podcast than I normally have. Normally they're 15 minutes. You're gonna watch this, it's 45 minutes, I don't know, something like that. And I would encourage you, I've got slide decks that's also embedded. I edit it a lot of time. I would encourage you to pay attention where I help us understand how we restructure our classes, how we go old school, right? I'm going to be introducing in detail the Mastery Flip model, right? That has AI engines, so there's still AI. I'm not a Luddite. We still could use technology. Technology is not all bad. But then we make our classroom. This classroom right here is much more analog roots. Students are going to be working with papers and pencils. And then we've got Mastery Vivas, where we bring back the oral exam, the oral assessment into the classroom to really assess student knowledge. And that way what happens, of course, is that the AI can be your friend and your helper to help prepare you for these oral exams. Very Socratic. So it's like going old school. And so here, this introduction, as I talked to these, I was medical educators in Brazil in May of 2026. And so I encourage you to listen to that. And then as you listen, I would encourage you, if you're not sure, I have released a course called the Mastery Flip course that released right after this conference happened in May that a lot of teachers are using. There's schools who are now getting on board with this. Just today, nine teachers from a particular school just signed up. So I would encourage you to consider the Mastery Flip. Remember also for the Mastery Flip course, you may or may not know this, but if you come in teams of 4 or more, you get half off. I want this to just spread. This is a method of teaching that is working across the world. So yeah, but here's the keynote, the full length keynote. Keep one more thing in mind is that I'm going to be releasing excerpts or actually full transcripts of my conversations with professors from Harvard and from MIT about how we can rethink education, and that'll be coming in some special editions in the weeks to come. So hey, welcome to the Reach Every Student podcast. Have you noticed, along with me, something's been changing in the last couple of years? Do you guys remember when you're helping a student and they have that aha moment? They're struggling with a concept and they get it, boom. But I've been noticing in the last 2 years that students, there's less moments. I was with a colleague of mine just last week, and she says, you know, John, I have all these office hours, but nobody's coming. They used to come to my office hours, and they don't anymore. You see, what's happening in the last 2 years, I believe, is students are pushing a button. It's the easy button. Struggling to write that essay for your professor? ChatGPT, easy button. trying to figure out what you want to do for your next clinical, easy button. Struggling with that difficult concept, easy button. I believe what's happening in our schools, both universities and secondary schools, is students are too quick to push the easy button. So, hey, I'm John Bergman, and I'm a teacher, and this is me with some of my students. Yeah, and a number of years ago, 2 years ago, in fact, I was asked by my principal to explore artificial intelligence. He said, John, I want you to figure this AI thing out for me. And so that summer, I subscribed to all the AI tools. I read the books. I went all in. I said, I think this could be the most amazing thing that could happen to education. So I was totally enthusiastic about this. I said, yes, I'm in. I want to do it. And you know what happened? I failed. It was a total disaster. I got the worst reviews of my career as a teacher, and I realized what is going on. That led me to a quest to figure out how should we teach in the age of AI. Now, before I tell you more about my failure, I want to just tell you something about my weird career. I've had a strange career. So if you don't know anything about me, I started teaching in 1986. I don't know if you do the math there. It's been 40 years ago that I stood in front of this group of kids as their teacher. Yeah, that's me with the hair. Yeah, okay. And then in the rest of my career, there you can see me getting older, getting fatter, and then getting skinnier. You can see me through the career. And then in 2003, I had a chance I was honored by the White House to be the presidential awardee for the science teaching. There I am in the middle there in front of Mrs. Bush. Yeah, there I am. And so I won some cool awards as a teacher. And then I moved, our family moved to a new town. And well, this happened. Let's watch a quick video clip.
The staffers at Woodland Park High School are getting attention worldwide for not giving out homework. Instead, the students watch recorded lectures at home and then do the corresponding homework during their regular class time. 11 News reporter Rosie Barisi is live tonight in Woodland Park. And Rosie, how do the students like it?
Well, Don, they love it, according to teachers and educators from as far as Japan have been calling the school asking where they came up with this brilliant idea. Two teachers at the school say they stumbled on it on accident.
Those are mole-to-mole ratios.
The only homework these Woodland Park High School students ever really get is to watch TV.
Kids learn with a screen. I'm an old guy. You know, I like a book. I read a book this weekend. It was like with paper, you know, but these kids, they read with things like, you know, they look at screens.
Jonathan Bergman and Aaron Sams decided it would be a good idea to record their lectures live.
We discovered this software.
It was intended for students who couldn't make it to class.
Wow, this is an amazing teaching tool.
And that's when their wheels started turning.
What if we did that all the time?
And now they do.
Instead of sitting and wasting 45 minutes listening to a teacher yap, they're going to have more time to work one-on-one with the teacher, work through problems, do a lot more hands-on activities, a lot more lab activities.
Allowing students to do the brunt of their work in class has worked wonders for their students.
They used to go home and they would get stuck, they would call their friend, which is okay, they would cheat, or they would just give up on it.
Student scores have shot up this year, leading teachers to believe this is the way of the future.
It's going to happen. I think it's a matter of time. This is going to take off.
Kids can watch lectures on their iPods, cell phones, and the internet, but since not all kids have access to all those things, teachers can burn their lectures onto DVD, and so far they say that's worked for all the students at the high school. Don?
And we didn't even have DVDs when I was in high school. Rosie, thanks very much.
2008, and I didn't know it would take off that I'm standing on this stage, and that was the birth of the flipped classroom movement that Aaron and I started. And after that, I was put on a council by the governor of the state of Colorado to help thinking about education. That led to some people saying, John, you need to leave the classroom, and you're going to have a bigger impact. And so Aaron and my first book came out, and so then I had the opportunity to really travel all over the world, and I've just had a great privilege. I've been, as you can see, in Dubai, in Iceland, in Taiwan, in South Korea, Spain, India, Argentina, just in Misiones, not far from here really, New Zealand, China, Turkey. This is the first flipped university in the world. They started out as a flipped university. MEF University. It's Australia simulcast. 25,000 people watched me that day. And here in Brazil, this is, I think, my 5th time here in Brazil speaking with audiences. When I said I think this is going to take off, I had no idea. That first book that Aaron and I wrote has then translated into many languages, has led to many, many other books that we've written, and I've written it together. And then in 2019, I was at a conference in Florida. So I was doing, so for 7 years, 8 years, something like that, I traveled the world talking about flipped learning. And then in 2019, I'm at this conference in Florida with these teachers. And these teachers, we went to lunch that day, and we had a conversation, and I felt like, man, they're telling me about the stories from their classroom, and I thought, man, something's missing in my life. So my wife and I went on a vacation to Sedona, Arizona, and we spent 2 weeks where we unplugged and began to rethink what's next in our life. And amazingly, I really felt, I'm a person of faith, and in my faith, I really felt honestly that God was saying, John, I want you to be back in the classroom. And so I thought of all the schools that had hired me to come and do work with them. What school did I think would be the best school that I could ever imagine to work at? And this is me doing a professional development at Houston Christian High School. I reached out to them and they said, we'd love to have you as a teacher. And so here I am as a teacher in that school. So I started in 2019. So I just completed my 7th year. Classes ended literally on Friday of this last week. And so I'm here with you guys because of that. So I've had a weird career, right? I started out as a teacher, and then I did the book guru thing, and then I'm back in the classroom. And so I hope what I share is rooted in what it means to be truly a teacher. So let's go back to my failure with respect to AI. So here's the 2 stories. Story number 1 is I teach a geology class. And the geology class, it's a secondary school, right? And it's kind of the terminal class. It's the last science class these students will take. And so you're not getting your top scholars, shall we say. And I thought, I've got this great idea. I want them to go deeper. And we had this really cool AI tool. And I said, I'm going to have the AI. They're going to interact with the AI. And the AI is going to ask them questions. They're going to respond. And if they don't get the right answer, it's going to go back and forth. It's going to be awesome. And I designed it so they would do it in class. But then what I found interesting is they would say, oh, Mr. Bergman, we're just going to do it at home. And I said, okay. But this is what they did. They went home, they opened up ChatGPT, and they answered the AI assignment with AI. And then they came to their tests and they failed because they were pushing the easy button. And then I also teach our highest level physics class at our school. And so these are our best and brightest students. And I'll never forget the day when I was watching one of our top students, actually our top student who was, I don't know if you have this equivalent, but she was our valedictorian Friday. Okay, I just watched her give her valedictorian speech just a little bit ago. But I remember watching this young lady, and she was doing a hard physics problem, and she had her laptop open, and she pulled up ChatGPT, and she quickly typed a question to get help. She wasn't cheating in its truest sense. She was trying to get help, make efficient use of her time. But you see, I knew that if she had sat with that problem for 2 more minutes, she would have got it. But what had happened in her brain is she shortchanged the process of that struggle that she needed. And I realized something's wrong. And so after I began to realize my failure, I said, what's going on in the minds of our students with misuse of AI? And so it led me to a quest, and I'm going to talk to you more about the quest and what it led me to. But I want to talk about AI, what AI was built for, and what the research is saying about, if you will, the misuse of AI. And if you think about AI, AI was built for the boardroom, not the classroom. It was built by people in Silicon Valley. In February, I was in Silicon Valley doing a similar presentation to this. It's built for efficiency and speed. It will speed up your process like anything. But you see, schooling, education is inefficient by design. It should be inefficient because learning is an inefficient process. And that is the disconnect that we have. I think Ted Chiang said it so well. Using ChatGPT to complete an assignment is like taking a forklift to the weight room. You get the same benefit. Think about that for a moment. I regularly take time to lift weights. I go to the gym, but if I brought the forklift, I wouldn't be strong, right? The only way to get stronger is to lift more weights, heavier weights, or maybe the same weight more times. That's how you get stronger. There is an equivalent. We have to have people's brains think deeply, multiple times, again, to work those cognitive muscles, if you will, right? So in my quest for thinking about AI, I've developed a framework, which I'm going to share at the end here, a framework. But in that framework, I had a chance to visit with a number of professors and ask them what they thought about this new methodology that I'm going to share. It's sort of a flipped model, you'll see in a minute. But one of the people I interviewed, and you'll see him a couple times, is Dr. Justin Reich from MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. And let's listen to him talk about AI.
Like a story I've been telling is I went to DeepMind the other day in London, which makes Gemini and works with Google, and I found every engineer I could. And I said, do you know how to train a junior engineer to code with a Copilot? And every single project manager, software engineer I asked said, no, we don't know how to do that yet. And that's pretty consequential. Like Google has billions of dollars at stake answering that question, because when junior engineers use Copilot, sometimes their output is bad. But also, It's not clear that if junior engineers are using Copilots, that they'll become senior engineers. That part of the way that we develop expertise is by using our own minds, and if we offload that, they're in trouble. To me, it's something like, if Google doesn't have that figured out, like, what is a 7th grade computer science teacher supposed to do?
You caught the whole thing, but he visited with the people who are making Google Gemini, and he's asking these questions, and Google hasn't figured it out. And in part of our conversation, that I think that was most revealing, I don't have a clip of this, but he said, the reality is nobody knows how to teach in the age of AI. But we have to figure this out. And he says, you know who's going to be the best people to figure it out? It's going to be you and me. It's going to be those of us who are in the trenches, in real classrooms with real students. And maybe we'll know in 10 or 12 years, but nobody knows yet. And so one of my big charges is that we have to figure this out. The stakes are way too high for us to not do this. And then, so as I dug deeper into my quest to understand AI from how to use this in the classroom, I came up with a prediction that I'm sorry, it's not awesome. My prediction is that we are headed for a great bifurcation. Okay, we're going to have two options. We're going to have an option number one where students will be, pardon my language, but stupefied. They will be stupefied. They will lose intelligence because they're going to misuse AI. Or on the opposite side, they're going to use AI that's going to help them thrive in ways that are unimaginable. But I think both things are going to happen at the same time. And my quest is that my students, and I hope your students, are going to be the ones who are thriving and not being stupefied. Now, some of the research is interesting about this. The path of stupefaction, what does that look like? It could downgrade human intelligence. I don't know if you've seen this. I have. The students are not coming to me as bright as they used to. And a lot of it is because they're pushing that easy button. They're bringing the forklift to the weight room. That's a problem. That's a huge problem. As I was delving into this, I was asked to write an article. So I wrote this article. It was the most read article in the history of this magazine. AI will stupefy our students unless we do these 6 things. I've actually changed my mind on what those 6 things are at this stage, but it caught a lot of attention, and I think it's really helping us. I don't know if you're familiar, most of you are medical educators, but John Hattie, if you look at the upper time, John Hattie is considered the top researcher in education in the world today. Okay, Australian professor, and he says here, along with Haran and Hamilton, they said they're the risk and the reality of the mass downgrading of human skills and abilities is possible. All right, this terrifies me, okay? We do not want our students to be less intelligent. We need them to be more intelligent. We need them to grow. And like I said, I think we're going to see this bifurcation that we don't want. And one of the charts that maybe is the most scary thing you might see is what they're saying is that if you take an expert, and my guess is all of you are experts in your fields, right? You're an expert in physiotherapy, you're an expert in surgery, you're an expert in whatever your field is, and we give you AI, and it will, as he says, it's going to 2 to 5 times increase your abilities. But if you take a novice and you give them AI, it downgrades their abilities. And I have a realization. I teach novices. Every student I have is a novice. Even if they're the brightest student in my classroom, they've never been exposed to physics. Not at the level that I'm teaching at. So they are novices, and they're going to be downgraded by this. This terrifies me, okay? And then Gerlich said in 2025, the findings revealed, so he took university students and he studied, I don't know, 600 or something like that, and he tagged frequent usage of AI versus less frequent, and they said here, the findings revealed a significant negative correlation between frequent AI tool usage and critical thinking abilities. So some of the research is indicating that critical thinking is being diminished by AI, okay? And then the Brookings Institute came out with this year. Brookings Institute is a big think tank in Washington, D.C., and they looked at the positives and negatives of AI. It's like a 60-page report. I read the whole thing, and it basically came up with this final conclusion. The risks of utilizing AI in education overshadow its benefits. Okay, that's scary. All right, I'm painting a terrible picture, I know. So let's listen to a couple more of our experts.
You know, how do I know the students are thinking? Are they cheating? Sometimes you have a case where, you know, the kid is writing something with Gen AI, and then the teacher's actually giving feedback with Gen AI, and you realize, you know, going from one to the other, passing through no minds in between, right? So, I mean, it really is a concern. And I think, you know, the question is, will it make us stupider? Yes, in some ways. Could it make us smarter? Yes, in some ways. And it depends how we use it.
So isn't that the key point? How we use AI is going to make all the difference. And not just we, but our students is what really matters. Or listen to, again, another Harvard professor that I chatted with.
Now, the education system of the past is still primarily focused on content knowledge, both acquisition and regurgitation, while the world simply doesn't care how much our kids know. What the world cares about is what they can do with what they know. And now in the age of AI, the idea of having skills, the skills that AI doesn't have, becomes even more essential for both work and for citizenship.
Lots of interesting things to think about when we think about AI. A few years back, I had a chance to visit Harvard Medical School. This is Dr. Richard Schwartzstein. And Dr. Schwartzstein has pioneered a lot of things at the university there, or at the medical school. And I don't know if you know this, but years ago, Harvard Medical School flipped their instruction. And so I had a chance to go visit with Dr. Schwartzstein. And let me just tell you what I saw that day. I was in a class, it was a hematology class. And as I was watching this class happen, number one, he threw a case up on the screen, and all of a sudden he said, all right, go. I don't know exactly how I said it. And each student was at a table, they had note cards, and they were all quiet. By the way, the room was filled. I understand that sometimes medical students don't come to class, but this room was filled. And they were trying to diagnose individually what they thought was the condition of the patient. And then he said, boom, round two, they're at tables of 4, and now they're arguing with each other. I think he's got this type of thing, and he's, what's the word? It was some kind of a blood illness. I can't think of it. So, they were arguing. And then he brought it to the whole group. Maybe there's 60 people in the room, something like that. And then they discussed through this. He calls this case-based collaborative learning, and it was very, very powerful. And as I was preparing for this presentation, I looked up Dr. Schwartzstein again, and he's become a very interesting person in the world of AI and medical education. And he said this, over-reliance on AI. So this is the same guy, Harvard Medical School guy that I met. In education, it risks preventing learners from ever developing essential skills, such as note writing, clinical assessment, where trainees from the form core habits that should not be replaced by AI shortcuts. He says other things. I was reading more of his work, and it's just, he's very concerned about AI in medical education. One thing he said, and one of the things, I don't have a snippy quote on it, something to the effect that oftentimes AI will give you a case study that's perfect. But the reality is most of the time somebody perfect, like it's just, it's textbook. But the reality is when a patient comes to see a doctor, it's not textbook perfect. Maybe their number over here is higher than it should be, or lower, or they have some other condition. I don't know, I'm no doctor, don't pretend to be one. But the reality is you need somebody who can critically look at this and say, no, it's this. Even though these numbers aren't really right, I'm convinced that this patient has this lupus, or I don't know what it would be, some disease or something like that. You see, productive struggle, if there's a theme of today's talk, I hope that you get this. I think productive struggle is a feature of education, not a bug. When we make learning too easy, we rob students of learning. They don't actually learn it. We need to, I'm a physics teacher, right? We need to apply friction into their learning process that slows them down for them to actually learn it. Productive struggle is very important in the learning process. I don't care if you're teaching doctors or I'm teaching 17-year-olds. Same thing. And I don't know if you saw this. 2 days ago, the Holy Father, right? He came out with this, the Magnificat Humanitas, where he addressed artificial intelligence. So I was at the airport in Sao Paulo for 5 hours on my layover, and I read the entire thing. It's, I don't know, 4,500 words. And I read this entire thing, and I pulled a couple of quotes out, and I'll even close with them. He said, education, by contrast, is a long journey requiring patience and therefore needs time for development and for engagement with reality beyond appearances. So this is just 2 days ago. And then he says this, the speed and ease with which answers or summaries can be obtained risk extinguishing the desire to ask questions, which is a process that bears fruit only over time. As Plato wrote, the deepest and most important things are learned only after much time and effort by engaging in discussion with others. I would encourage you, download it, and they've got options, English, Portuguese, etc., many, many options that came out 2 days ago. And I'm going to say something crazy. If you send home difficult cognitive things, you're crazy today. Because if you send home the difficult cognitive things, they're going to push the easy button. They're going to bring the forklift to the weight room. If your students are like mine, I bet they are, that's what they're going to do. So we've got to figure out, how can we now teach in this age of AI? And so another opportunity I had is in the fall, maybe October, I want to say, this past year, I was invited to a symposium about AI at the Rockefeller Center in New York City. It was really cool. I was way up, it was a beautiful place. And it was a STEM university symposium. There were 12 of us in the room. One of the persons was President Biden's former head of nuclear engineering. Okay, another one was a person who ran computer science at the University of Michigan, who was the largest online computer science course in the world. And mechanical engineering professors and other STEM professors, and then me. The only person who was from, if you will, lower education. And a couple things came out of that conference. The first thing, as we're talking about this, they says, we don't know what to do. How do we not send home the hard stuff? And they basically, almost in unison, said, I think we need to flip our classes. Hence, that's why I was there, right? And then out of that, I'll send you a link if you want, is we also wrote a letter to our students about AI. And so I had written one actually at the beginning of this past school year for my students, but then we modified it to be a more broad general audience. And it was a very powerful letter, I hope, that helped a lot of students. It has been downloaded many, many times off of my website. And yeah, it's a very helpful thing that we came, so those are two big things that came out of that symposium. And so speaking of flipped learning, I want to talk about flipped learning for just a moment. There's Aaron and I. Now, we were just a couple of high school teachers. You saw me with much more black hair. I'm older now, right? And the idea of flipped classroom, or aprendizaje invertida, I don't know, is that you want to send home the easy stuff. That's the idea. If you had been in my classroom those first 19 years when I was a traditional teacher, you would have seen that I spent the vast majority of my time, if you will, at the bottom of Bloom's taxonomy. What I mean by that is that I was standing up and doing the lecture thing. I was teaching my students the things, Newton's laws, or how to balance a chemical equation. And then I sent them home with the hard stuff to apply and analyze and evaluate and create. But in a flipped classroom, what happens, of course, is we flip Bloom's taxonomy on its head, and you spend less class time at the bottom of Bloom's and more at the top. And I honestly think the ideal shape of Bloom's is this diamond shaped, where you spend the bulk of your time in the middle of Bloom's taxonomy. I believe that's where you want your students applying and analyzing and probably evaluating. I imagine in medical field, you'd want them to evaluate. But if you send them home to evaluate, AI is pretty good at that. It's really good at that, and it will do them, and they will shortchange their thinking, and they won't be able to think for themselves. We don't want that. We want them to think. They want them to think for themselves. So a couple of terms in the world of flipped learning. We talk about the two spaces, the independent space and the group space. So in the independent space, that's where the students will do some pre-learning work. So when I was at Harvard Medical School, the independent space work was for them to read. So they had articles to read, they had textbooks to read, they had PDFs to read, these kinds of things. In fact, when they were trying to diagnose the patient, they had papers out, even iPads, and they were looking things up, and they were trying to diagnose whatever the ailment was for that particular patient. Because they had done their independent space work at that time. And then the space for the group, Espacio del Grupal, is where active learning takes place, right? This university is all about active methodologies. That's why you have been very successful. I learned over lunch. So what are you going to do in active learning classrooms? There are so many things. Maybe it's that collaborative case-based study model. There's lots of things that you can do in the group space. Ultimately, it comes down to this question. What's the best use of your face-to-face class time? That is the biggest question you should ask. And I'm going to argue it's not you standing in front of your students and doing the lecture thing. That's not going to work anymore. I mean, you can do it, but interesting thing. While I was visiting the Harvard, I had a friend who was going to medical school in Chicago. I was living in Chicago at the time. And I was chatting with him, and Joe, talked to Joe. Joe said, I hardly ever go to class. I said, how come? Because they just stand up there and lecture, and I got to get ready for my boards, and it's just more efficient for me just to learn it on my own. And then I went to Harvard, and this room was packed. And so I'd had that conversation with my friend Joe, who was in med school, and I walked over to one of the groups, and I said, why are you here? You know that most med students don't come to class. And this one young man said, I'd be an idiot to not come to this class. I learned so much in this time. This is actually really preparing me, not just for my boards, but for my career later. I said, okay. So that active methodology makes such a big difference, doesn't it? So I have now developed a new framework. And so this is what I want to really share with you. And my conversation tomorrow is going to take this and go much, much deeper. So I'm calling it the mastery flip model. So there's a flipped component, and it has 3 components: AI engines, analog roots, and human checks. So it's a 3-part thing that I've been using with my students. So this is not something I invented in an ivory tower. All right, I'd use this with my students. I did last week, okay? Yeah, so AI engine. So I am not anti-AI. Don't hear me say that. It's using AI wrongly that I'm against. And so where I see this working is the pillar 1, if you will, is these AI engines. And an AI engine is something where my students are going to go home and they're going to do some pre-learning at home before they come to class. Used to be just with a flip video, but now there are ways that AI can enhance this. And there's also tools where AI can actually create very high quality videos, or you can have it create. If you've played around with a Notebook LM, it's got some really cool tools that will make some very interesting things that it's not perfect yet, but you could cut and paste, if you will, and make it better. And then pillar 2 is interesting. And then in pillar 2, it's analog roots. So when my students walk into my classroom, you know what the deal is? Laptops away, no cell phones, paper pencil. It's going back to old school because it's too easy for them to swipe and have chat open up. And so you know what I often say, you know what they're doing? If I walk by and they've got their laptops open, they're shopping on Amazon or something. What's the next pair of shoes I'm going to buy? But that's distracting them from the learning process. And when the laptop is in their backpack, they can't shop on Amazon. Listen up again to Dr. Grotzker from Harvard. Listen to her talk about the analog roots.
Oh, I still think pencil and paper. I really do.
Why?
Because you are getting in touch with what you know and what you understand.
There's a recent, it's been around for a long time actually, article about the pen is mightier than the keyboard. There's a research study about that. And basically, paper versus laptops for even just taking notes. It's not close. Paper wins. Or MIT professor, I presented this model to him, and then he thought about his daughter. Listen to what he said.
Like if my daughter, who's in the 10th grade now, spent about 95% of her time in analog roots and about 5% of her time on the spaceship, that would sound pretty good to me.
The spaceship was AI, as you're referring to it. So, we need our students to just sit and in that slow, inefficient process of learning. It's a slow, inefficient process. This is what it is. And then the last part. Oh, yeah, and I'm going old school. These are my 7.4 questions from my geology class. How I check it off and all that stuff. So it's textbooks, paper, pencils. And then let's take a look. This is my classes. So active methodologies for the win. And then the third pillar, this is the thing that maybe is, I think, the most innovative thing that I'm doing, is what I'm calling human checks or mastery vivas. So what is this mastery viva thing? It is a return to the oral exam. So my job is to walk around and talk to students. So when a student finishes a lesson, they're going to have a 2-minute conversation with me. And I'm going to ask them a key question about something, some aspect of the lesson. And I'm walking around with a paper and pencil clipboard with their names. And I've got the assignment number, whatever. And I'm going to then just say, explain to me when the viscosity of the lava is this, why it creates this kind of a volcano versus this other kind of volcano. Boom, go. And they're expected to understand it. And sometimes they don't, and I'll say, you need to figure it out. Bye, go figure it out. Because they have not answered that question, and they'll have to do some work. So I have 2 to 3 minute formative conversations with students, but I've also now incorporated it into a summative assessment, the final exam, if you will, where they have to explain much deeper, where I have 10-minute conversations. Now, the thing that's been very interesting, if you look at the last point there, AI acts as a coach. AI is no longer the cheat button. AI is the coach to prepare them for a real conversation with me button. Now AI is being much, much more useful for them in a positive way. It's not shortchanging their learning, it's enhancing their learning, right? That's that AI thriving on the bifurcation chart. So that's really important. Now, you're probably asking this question. Oh yeah, and I still, by the way, give old school tests. My students still sit for old school tests. They have the oral piece, but it's a second part of their exams. I still think it's important that they learn how to solve physics problems, right? Or whatever it might be. So what's a day in the life of a Mastery Flip student looks like? Well, number one, they will do some work at home, sometimes enhanced by AI, okay? You don't have to do the AI piece here. Then they're gonna come to class and they're gonna work analog. Paper, pencil, etc. Now I have a vision, and when I was in San Francisco, I shared this. I think there's a place for AI here too. Now, maybe you have many, many students in your class, okay? And how can you, when they're stuck, and you've got a small class, it's easy to help all the students. But what if you have a large group of students? I envision an unstuck wrapper. I think we need wrappers with AI, if you will. And what we need is, if they're stuck, what I'm thinking is there's a space in my room, there's a laptop or a 2 or 5 or whatever, and the students are going to go over to that one section, and then they're going to show their work to the AI that they've done something, and then the AI is going to help them get unstuck. Does that make sense? So it's a helper. If there's too many people in the room, if you will, or too many students to the teacher, I can't maybe get to all the students in every class. Maybe you've got a class of 80 or 100 students. It's impossible for you to get to all those students. That's not going to happen. So maybe there's a place where AI can be your assistant, your TA, right? So I think that's a powerful thing. But they're going to make them work in class on those kinds of things. And then the last thing is the Mastery Viva. Again, there's another tool that can assist with this, because I've been thinking about this, and a neuroscientist approached me just in the last 5 months, and she's developing an AI tool that is just designed to do oral exams. And I'm not comfortable with AI doing all my oral exams. That would not be a case. But my thinking here with large classes is that, every 4th time you get Mr. Bergman, and 3 times out of that you get the AI, or maybe it's every other time, or we have a schedule where, I see one group of students on we call A days and B days. So on the A days, you get Mr. Bergman. On the B days, you get the AI. I'm just trying to think logistically, how do I do it with larger classes? And so I'm going to be piloting this tool. I'll demonstrate the actual tool tomorrow. At least it's prototype. They've given me permission to show that to you. So that's the Mastery of Viva. And you might say, all right, John, this doesn't exist. How do I do this tomorrow? How do I make this happen tomorrow? And I'm going to be mean to you. I'm going to say, come to my session tomorrow. Because I'm going to go in detail about how to run a Mastery Flip classroom. This is sort of just that, if you will, the teaser, if you will. So we have work to do. As we're thinking about the future of education, we have work to do. I have a QR code where I'll send you a 4-page primer on the Mastery Flip. So if you want to sign up for that, I'll have that QR code up as we get going. So yeah, I've also created an online course on the Mastery Flip, and that will lead you to that as well. So an online course. And then there's other options that I have on my website too. There's a course. So let's recap. We are facing the great bifurcation, where on one hand, we're going to stupefy our students, right? AI was not built for kids. There's this danger, and there is a loss, we're already seeing it, of critical thinking skills in our students. And we're teaching novices. But if we use the Mastery Flip, I believe that is a paradigm that can really work to help us solve the puzzle, if you will, of how to teach in the world of AI and not have our students be stupefied, but have our students be the ones who thrive in this age. I'm not trying to convince you about AI. I don't know if you've thought about this, and a lot of people have been saying this, and I'm now totally in agreement. But AI is the next industrial revolution, okay? It is as big as electricity was when electricity came to market. It is that big of a change. And yet I share many of the concerns of, say, the Pope, because the Pope said it very well. He's very concerned about the concentration. I was talking over earlier today with somebody here, is that AI is being run by a few very, very powerful companies who are run by some people that maybe you and I may not always agree with, say, their philosophy. It has a particular philosophical, that's what you got, epistemological bent. And we may not always agree with that. And even if we did, it's almost mono viewpoint. And we got to be careful with that. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to save the minds of our students. I don't want them to be stupefied. I want them to thrive. We've got to think this through. We can make this happen. And I think the Mastery Flip is a way that's going to really work with that. And let me sort of end with a couple of things, a story. This is Sam. Now, Sam took my geology class a year ago. And remember, I said the geology class was the class for their last science class. And so Sam took it. He was a big football player. Actually, I called him tiny, and he sits about this high. He's just massive. He was offered scholarships to play football at the university. And Sam said, you know, Mr. Bergman, I want to take your honors physics class next year. And I thought, you sure you want to do that? Because he struggled, even in the geology class. But he says, I'm ready. I've got this math background. And honestly, when I really figured it out, he loved my class and the way I taught. And he says, I want to do this. And so Sam took honors physics last year. And you know what? It was really hard for him because it was a very big stretch for him. And he would take a test and he'd have the lowest score. Now, because of my mastery model, I allow students to retake a test. And so he would retake a test. And then he would get a passing grade. And then he would go on to the next lessons and take the next test, and he would still be towards the bottom. And then around February, he was doing a retest. And you know, it's actually done on a computer through a lockdown browser. He's in the little corner doing this. And he finishes his test. I could tell he pushed submit or something like that. And his whole face changes. And I'm thinking, oh man, he failed again. And he turned to me in tears. And he said, Mr. Bergman, I got 100. And I almost cried. And you see, what Sam had done is he had not been pushing the easy button. He had sat in the the struggle of learning. He had kept the friction going, if you will, the physics metaphor. He'd kept the friction going so that he could stay with learning, right? Productive struggle is such an important thing for our students. We have to have a methodology that protects the productive struggle of our students. It's so, so important. And let's next hear a little closing remark from Dr. Tony Wagner from Harvard.
Before we go, John, I want to thank you. I wish our paths had crossed sooner. We are so much kindred spirits, and I so deeply admire the really important work that you're doing for the future of our kids. I really admire that.
So it was really good to get some admiration from Wagner, who's written some amazing books. So we've got to hard code that struggle. We've got to help design our classrooms, whether you choose the Mastery Flip methodology or some other thing. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to look like in medical education. I don't know what it's going to look like in Brazilian education. You're going to have to contextualize this, but we've got to do whatever we do, it has to be in a way that protects the productive struggle, the friction of learning. Let's close with the Pope. In the era of AI, when human dignity is threatened by new forms of dehumanization, ours is the pressing duty to remain profoundly human. Whatever we do, we have to preserve the humanity of humans. And the Pope said it way better than I could. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. I hope that you got a lot out of this presentation and that it helps you understand that we can rethink how we do education. We can go old school for this generation. Again, reminder, the Mastery Flip certification course is live on the website. I'll provide the link in the show notes. And if 4 more of you join, then you get half off. So, hey, thanks for listening this far. Go out and reach every student. This has been me, your host, John Burton.